Hi folks, I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi everybody, I'm Ken Calvert alongside my very good friend Father Joe Grimaldi, and welcome to the Father Joe Podcast. Well, wait a minute, we sprang forward, so we're all just a little sleepy here this morning. But welcome to the podcast. The Father Joe Podcast is proudly supported by Houghton McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile Road, east of Telegraph in Southfield. Want to talk to you about the all-new 2019 Lincoln Nautilus. You get an impressive twin turbocharged 2.7-liter engine, 22-way adjustable seats, a Rebel audio system, a panoramic Vista sunroof, and an absolutely incredible tech package. Make sure to ask about instant savings during the end of winter savings going on right now. These are specials that are going away. Those savings are available as well on the full lineup of Houghton McInerney Star Lincolns, including the Lincoln MKC. I've been in it a lot, and I love it. Stop on by and make sure you tell them you heard about Star Lincoln on the Father Joe Podcast. Houghton McInerney Star Lincoln on 12 Mile Road, just east of Telegraph, or visit starlincoln.com. Ladies and gentlemen, a man who probably needs a little introduction, Father Joe Grimaldi. Welcome back, Father Joe. How are you? Did you have a decent day, a good weekend?
A very good day, a good weekend. I'm ready to go.
And here we are. We decided today that we're going to talk about the RCIA program. Now, in radio, that would be a London radio station, RCIA Radio 1. But no, in the Catholic Church, it's the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults, correct?
Correct.
Why does it overlap with, or why is there a greater significance with the RCIA during Lent than maybe other times of the year?
It takes on tremendous importance during Lent, even though it goes on for 2 years, actually.
Oh.
I do want to explain a couple of things before we go on to answer your question. Initiation, what is that? Well, initiation in the Catholic Church means that you've been baptized, that you've been confirmed, and that you now can receive communion. Those three sacraments are what we call the sacraments of initiation. The initiation process is really what allows somebody to enter the Catholic Church. Once they receive those three sacraments, they're eligible for all the other sacraments. That's the key, if you want. And that's why it's called, those three sacraments are called the sacrament of initiation. But the idea is that once you receive the sacraments of initiation, you are completely a member of the church. You are part of the community, and this is why we call it communion, Holy Communion. You know, sometimes people say, well, why do we have to allow only Catholics to receive communion? Well, because they're part of the communion. They're part of the community. That's why. If they're outside of that community, it makes no sense to them. But anyway, so that's the initiation. Now, because we have this separation of sacraments, many people go through the first 20, 30, 40 years of their lives without having received any of the sacraments or without having received confirmation and communion. So the church years ago instituted a program that was called the Rite of Christian Initiation for adults. And so they meet regularly with certain leaders in the church to kind of become a part of that church. So, in other words, to try to be immersed in it. And what does it mean? But they cannot really be fully accepted until the Easter Vigil. The night before Easter, the church does a tremendous celebration. Easter is the high holy day for the Catholic Church. It is the, bar none, feast of the Catholic Church. And so on the eve, when they light the new fire and bless the waters and all of that, they have reception. First of all, those who have never been baptized, they are baptized that night and receive confirmation and communion throughout that Mass.
I have to stop you for a second because
Yeah.
I'm confused about one element. Going back to the very beginning of what you were talking about here, you were saying some go 30 or 40 years without receiving.
Yes.
Were they still actually practicing, or were they going to Mass?
Some do, some don't. They
Some
just
people
don't
just
know.
independent from all, without having any sort of Catholic education or whatever.
Correct.
Just sort of at one point in their life, they picked a church, went in and started attending services, and eventually grew into the Catholic faith, minus having baptism, First Communion, and confirmation.
Correct.
Okay. They felt like real members of the Catholic community. Did they feel like they were doing something wrong, or?
Yeah, I think eventually, not wrong.
Okay.
That's not. People could certainly come, but if they're receiving communion, they shouldn't be. And but Lent is a very special time of the year for a lot of people, and sometimes some get inspired when you least expect it.
Right.
Matter of fact, very often, the people that make up the group for any one year could be a surprise to you, because you would never expect these people to be so interested that they would follow this program so that they could be baptized at Easter. But the thing is this, that many people are baptized, but not as Catholics. So if they're baptized as Baptist or Methodist or whatever the case might be, most of the mainstream churches accept each other's baptisms. So those people don't have to have baptism. See, baptism is the sacrament, the only sacrament that you receive it once, you never have to receive it again, okay?
Right.
Because it's there.
Yep.
It's indelible, and so on. So you have people that were baptized Methodist, but now they want to become Catholic. They go through the RCIA program, and they're called candidates, not catechumens. Catechumens are those people who have never been baptized. A candidate is someone who's been baptized, but not as a Catholic, and wants to become part of the Catholic Church. So on the eve of Easter, both the catechumens and the candidates are welcomed into the Catholic Church. So what happens at those meetings is, well, everything you can imagine. I mean, they discuss reconciliation. What is that all about? They discuss the holy days. They discuss the customs. Why are there different colors in the church during Advent and Lent? You have purple. Why do we have that? And why do we have white on certain, green on certain? So all of these little things that are not necessarily essential, some are, but in order to be a Catholic, you should be familiar with these things,
Yeah.
okay? Because other people are going to be talking about them.
I got an idea for you.
Yes.
And I mean this seriously. It's going to sound like I'm being flip, but I'm not. I think that there are a lot of Catholics that could use a good old refresher course.
Well, there's no question. This is what the Archbishop...
Now, wait a minute. Are you angry at me for saying that?
No, I think it's fantastic.
Oh,
no,
okay.
Most Catholics don't know their faith.
Folks, you didn't see, but he just reached up with his right hand and kind of gestured at me like...
No, because I wanted to say this, that the Archbishop has come up with Unleash the Gospel.
Right.
That's what it's about. There are people, you look at it this way, we at least have to go through grade school to have some sort of literacy. Most Catholics, theologically, never go beyond the third grade, okay?
Yes.
They don't know their faith.
You are correct, sir.
They don't know their faith.
Yeah.
So you almost have to do an evangelization for the Catholics themselves.
Thank you. You realize that that's sort of my burden here as the I don't want to say co-host, as the Ed McMahon,
Oh, no,
as the Ed McMahon of the Johnny Carson show. You're Johnny, I'm Ed.
I think you do a great job.
You articulated beautifully as a priest, as a theologian, and then I'm thinking exactly what you're saying about the catechumens and the candidates. I was like, okay, he went right. Okay, then he just went left. And then we're going to do this, and then they can become this and that. Like I said, I think everybody could use a little old refresher course.
So here we are, the Lenten period.
Mm-hmm.
So we go into high gear. And so we have what they call scrutinies. So you have 15 people who are not yet candidates or have not been received into the Catholic Church or who are not baptized as Catholics. They are still part of the RCIA, but it goes into high gears. The scrutiny sounds horrible, but it's not meant to be that way. I mean, they have discussions with their leaders to see if they really want to continue the program and so on. Okay, but during this period of Lent, there are two things that happen. They are presented with the creed. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, and so on. And they're presented formally with it, not necessarily on Sunday. Some people do it on a Sunday just so that it gets more visibility. But actually it can be done during the week. So they get the creed. And why the creed? If you analyze the creed word for word, you will know everything there ever is to know about the Catholic Church. Everything. You know that there are three persons in one God.
Absolutely.
And you know that you have a virgin birth. If you look at the creed, I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. You have the creator of heaven and so on. So that's important. The other thing they're presented with during Lent is there's only two. So they say you have the creed and then the Our Father. Why? It's the only prayer that Jesus ever gave us that are his words, okay? And so it becomes a very important prayer. Now, throughout the Sundays of Lent, whenever there are catechumens or candidates present, which means almost all the masses, they use the A cycle. There are three cycles, A, B, and C. Well, the A cycle has special reading. Now, for example, obviously for the first Sunday of Lent, we dealt with Jesus' temptations. He was led into the desert. He was tempted in every way, but never sinned. We don't believe that he ever sinned. Now, we also have the admonitions about what is Lent all about. Prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Well, we certainly want to improve our prayer during Lent, but we also have to have some discipline of the body. And so you have fasting. Almsgiving always should be uppermost in our minds, helping those people that need the help. And so almsgiving, helping the poor. Don't neglect the poor. Then you go into the second Sunday of Lent, and you have the Transfiguration. That's where Jesus took his three favorite apostles, Peter, James, and John, and brought them up to Mount Tabor. And right in front of them, he was transfigured into something glowing, and he had told them what was going to happen to him. They were terrified. And so this was more like a honeymoon, huh? If you want to really be a follower of me, then you're going to have to really work very hard at it. But meanwhile, I'm going to show you what it's like to be part of heaven, okay? And so he physically changes, and he cited, interestingly enough, which takes in the whole religion, Moses, who represents the law. And then you have on the other side of him, Elijah, who represents all the prophets. And so you have everything that was leading up to who this Jesus Christ was. Why did he come as the Messiah? It's all bundled up into one in that beautiful account of the Transfiguration, third Sunday of Lent. You have the story of the woman at the well. It's a beautiful, touching story because this woman didn't know what anything was all about. So she's needing water. And in those days, women were not allowed to speak to men publicly like that. And so she asked for the water, and Jesus does give her the water, the living water, if you want, springing from the beautiful wells. But in any case, the powerful thing is there that Jesus, he speaks to her very gently, but he leads her into his camp. And so that even though she's had this horrible life, she now drinks from the living waters, is able to be a true follower of Jesus. And, you know, sometimes when we look at the scriptures, it's not always clear of who this woman is. It could be the same woman who people tried to condemn for adultery, and so let the person cast the first stone.
Yeah.
And so basically it's a story that Jesus loves you and me in our sinfulness. If we were perfect and he loved us, big deal. That means nothing. But because we are sinners and he loves us, is a big deal.
Yes.
He loves us in our sinfulness. And this is what happens when he shows us this kindness, this generosity. Because here's the sinful woman, and Jesus really approaches her and loves her in her sinfulness. I'm going to go to the fourth Sunday. The fourth Sunday is the healing of the blind man. And of course, symbolically, that's terrific for catechumens and why it's so important in the RCIA. See, each one of these Gospels is very important in building up the RCIA and healing the blind man. And Jesus does it gradually, okay? And the whole idea is that faith doesn't always come like a thunderbolt. It's something that you grow into it little by little, and eventually you prosper in it. But here's this man I want to see. Well, he wants to see. What does that mean? Not only physically does he want to see, he wants to see who this Jesus is by faith. And so this is why the blind man becomes such a powerful story for the catechumens and the candidates. Then you go on to the fifth, which is the story of Lazarus, his best friend. And remember Martha and Mary, his sisters, they were annoyed that they had notified Jesus that their brother was dying and had died. And it took Jesus a few more days to come. And so they were annoyed at him. He's your best friend. How can you? We're told that Jesus wept at that particular situation. What does that tell us? Jesus is speaking about the resurrection. Lazarus is dead, but he's alive. And this is why Jesus calls him forth from the tomb, to show that even though he's dead, Jesus can bring him to life, and he is alive in heaven. And so all of these stories that are in the Gospels for the season of Lent are powerful stories that help to build up the RCIA, the candidates as well. And then, of course, the following couple of Sundays, they're filled with all sorts of liturgy. Palm Sunday, Passion Sunday, and so on and so forth. But anyway.
And these are all basic tenets that we can take with us throughout the year and throughout our lives. But these are, like we were discussing midway through this particular podcast, I still think that all of us could, a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us could use a good old refresher course. But if you have any final thoughts on the RCIA program.
The RCIA program is a group of people sitting down discussing what the Catholic faith is all about. What I tried to do today is give you some of the highlights of what happens during Lent. And that's how it's related, because Lent leads us to the High Holy Day, which is Easter. And so it's a build-up for the catechumens when we have the story of Lazarus and the woman at the well. And so what you have just said is something that I find very important. Well, this whole week has been really interesting because what the Lord is trying to tell us, we have to be real. We have to be real. If it's inside, you should be able to see it outside. If the inside and the outside are absolute opposites, we're fakes. Mm-hmm. So we have to be real. If we're going to say Jesus lives in our hearts, well, that means we have to show Jesus in our actions. The Lord is going to treat you the way you treat others. If you have mercy towards others, the Lord is going to have mercy on you. I really don't have much more to add about the RCIA. It's relatively new, by the way. I can give you an experience that I had personally. There was a fellow who had been married way over 50 years, and he's never once missed Mass. He was a pagan, we would call him, okay?
Yeah.
He had no religion. He was non-Christian, but his wife was Catholic, and so he went to Mass every Sunday and never missed. Now, name me some Catholics that could say that.
Yeah,
so he came to me,
Got something
Father.
in my throat.
I know you're very emotional about that. So he came to me and he said, Father, I go to Mass every week. I've raised 2 beautiful women, beautiful girls, sent them to Catholic schools for 16 years of their lives. They all are productive citizens. We go to church. How do I become a Catholic?
Doesn't make sense to me.
I said, listen, we don't have to go through anything. I said, you just tell me when is a good day to have baptisms. We had a nice family gathering with his baptism. I don't know why, but he feels like $1 million because now he's part of the family. He's part of all the Catholics that he's always known. And here's a man who always, why would he need an RCIA?
Yeah.
Tell me.
Good point.
The reason for the RCIA these days is because we've discussed this. I mean, you're much better at this than I am. The diversity, the complexity of society today demands some response to beliefs. And so what happens is that there's a lot of confusion out there. Things have to be clarified. And sometimes the only way to have them clarified is that you get yourself immersed in a group that knows all about this kind of stuff so that you could learn too.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to talking to you on the next Father Joe Grimaldi podcast, the Father Joe podcast, and the Good Fada. And somebody today came up to me and said, hey, you're doing that podcast with that priest fellow there. And I said, yeah. He said, well, you ought to call it the Padre Cast.
That's a great line. I love it. I'm
Ken Calvert. That's Father Joe Grimaldi. We'll see you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
Terrific. I look forward to seeing you also. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.